How's everybody doing today? It's another wonderful tea with Andrew. I've got Brian Birds here with me. We're going to be talking about what we kind of talked about a little bit last week, as far as the Department of Justice going in and having conversations about not only a clear cooperation policy, but also multiple issues that they have with how we do our MLS, how things are done. There's attacking of free structures and all these different things that I think on the outside looking in is really easy to say, hey, this is horrible, it needs to be fixed. But when you're in the business and understand how the real world works and how things happen, attacking fee structures could be hugely detrimental to all involved in real estate, especially first-time home buyers or low-end home buyers. You've got situations where you say, hey, you get this big money. Well, I close 10 deals a year. If I don't get enough money in 10 deals a year to be able to have an income, I can't do that, which means I'm gonna have to get income somewhere else, which means I'm gonna have to start charging buyers every time they want to go look at a house. I'm gonna have to start charging for all of these things that we cover, passing on the cost to consumers for fees for advertising, for the cost of signs, fees, cost for MLS, all these different things that go into play to make that up. So it's an interesting process and thought where we say you're making too much money on this commission split, but that's everything. And that's the gross money. And out of that, you have to pay the brokers. You have to pay MLS fees. You have to pay board fees. You have to pay for a sign to be put in the yard. You have to pay for the contract, rights to use contracts, the right to use zip forms, the right to use dot loops or whatever service you're using for signatures, and so on and so on and so on, where we're now, your net income is nowhere near that commission split that you received, but nobody can see that. It's kind of like I had a grandmother who loved to gamble, and she would always talk about how much money she made at the casino, but she never mentioned how much money she put into a machine to get the money at the casino. If we look at it at face value, it's one thing, but when you start tearing apart the layers of the onion, it's a whole nother world. Thoughts on that, Brian?
So there's a lot of going on, and the problem is the Department of Justice is having a conversation right now about Sherman antitrust, where that resonates, and then figuring out like how does this all affect, right? And this is that conversation of government involvement in regulation. We've had this conversation multiple times between me and Andrew, is that, listen, starting, we had a contract that was X size, and today it's way bigger because our litigious society requires that we have to revise based on where people sue, when they sue, how they sue. And this is that conversation that we just need to be cautious of, because I think that we don't listen to it high enough and regularly enough for it to be something that's really relevant. Because I think, this conversation of the fact that, testing and looking at over 18 months of history, what is our actual amount due? But we forget that, a commission may be similar, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every agent is setting the price. This is price fixing, which we've all been told from day one not to do.
Well, that's the ironic thing is they're quoting anti-Sherman trust laws saying you can't, that we can't set prices, but then want to come back in the exact same breath and say, but we're going to set prices to how much you can charge. That goes against, one hand is taken from the other in ideologies there of, it's between all parties to say, hey, this is what I'm worth, this is the value, this is why I'm worth this much money, and I'm going to give this much money to a buyer's agent to entice them to bring an offer. And then they come in and say, okay, well, you can't charge that much money. Well, who are you to say how much I'm allowed to charge? If McDonald's wants to charge $40 for a hamburger, they have the right. No one may buy it, but they have that right. And that's where the government involvement can get scary in things, because I guarantee the people who are trying to do this most likely have never done real estate, have no knowledge of real estate, other than the costs and the issues that are involved in being in real estate. People can spend hours and hours showing houses, driving all over the town or in smaller communities, different towns, for them to never buy a house. And all of that money, all of that time, all that gas was wasted. They've got to make that up somewhere, somehow. And if they're going to sit there and say we can't charge money for commissions, costs are going to come from somewhere, because someone needs to pay for it.
And I think that's where a lot of people tend to forget that this is a business, and that this business does have uniformity, right? But every business has uniformity, right? If you buy a loaf of bread at the store and you want to sell that loaf of bread to a certain dynamic and a certain segment, you're going to price it accordingly with what, if not slightly below, or at least within accordance of what the other pricing is. It's kind of that Dollar Tree conversation, and then you can go buy the same thing for Walmart at 97 cents. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to create that 3 cent gap. But in our industry, I'm not a Walmart. Or maybe in this conversation, maybe I am the Walmart and the regular agent is the Dollar Tree, right? Because I can bring my price down and still make money, but they can't. And I don't know. It's a very scary tactic that they're getting involved in this, because I personally don't feel like there is a price set. I charge more commission than a lot of people, right? But now the federal government is having this conversation that no, the price, you're setting the price because the national average is X, right? And that's slightly terrifying that they're getting into this involvement.
Oh, it's very good. I mean, and you see it all across the board, and that's the nice thing about real estate. I mean, there are some offices here in El Paso County that have a flat fee. It's saying we charge this much money. It's all you're going to be charged, no matter what, no matter how big, no matter how small. Agents within a company will charge different amounts depending on their value and what they think they can bring to a table. And it'll be interesting to see how that happens. You know, the government. If I spend a lot of time working with and around the government, and I'll tell you, they don't do anything well. They, the county of El Paso would spend over $1 to give away $1, and that's scary. So if they have $1 million to give away, it's going to cost $1 million to give that $1 million away. That's a scary truth, and the government telling people to be more efficient is the biggest hypocrisy in the world. And to sit there and say you're overcharging when every year taxes are going up and there's nothing that we can do to say to stop that. And so you're going to raise our taxes and at the same time tell us that we can't charge money. It's a recipe for disaster, and real estate moves the world.
Yeah. And so here's the conversation that a lot of people are having is that yes, there may be a uniformity between it, but there's also a uniformity based on the marketplace, right? If you go to, Dallas, Houston, or if you go just to New Mexico as compared to Texas, there's two different commission structures. And yeah, they might have the baseline of a standardized commission, a baseline where everything kind of falls in the same fashion, but they're not accommodating for a couple of things. One, pricing structure, right? Listen, the 6% commission or 7% commission or 5% commission on a $100,000 house is substantially different than on a $5 million house, right? But there's also different marketing that has to be done for $1 million or $5 million as compared to $100,000. There's different labor requirements. I mean, listen, an open house for $1 million, you have to supervise the people that are coming into those properties so they're not just looky-loos. You have to do a lot more things because there's a privacy aspect that comes into a person who's selling a $5 million house. So this is the problem. They're looking at it black and white, and this is oftentimes where laws come into play. We had this conversation with Clear Cooperation, and a lot of the conversation is happening right now with the DOJ and National Association of Realtors about the Clear Cooperation Act, because we're setting a tone to tell everybody else what's supposed to happen. It's just black and white doesn't work in most industries, and it doesn't work oftentimes in government either. And that's why you have things that come on the books and then have to be adjusted afterwards.
Well, and the issue is just what you said. I mean, the thing about real estate that makes real estate so different is each area has its own style, flavor, whatever, however you want to put it. And they keep talking about in all the articles that are rolling around is the National Association of Realtors, MLS. Well, the National Association of Realtors does not have an MLS. Each MLS is a localized thing where El Paso has its own MLS. Las Cruces, New Mexico has its own MLS. Deming, New Mexico has its own MLS. All of these different groups that are sitting there saying, we do our thing, what works for our community and what works for the agents who are members of our organization. It's not a National Association of Realtors thing. Now, National Association of Realtors will come in and say, these are requirements that every MLS has to follow, but it's not the national MLS. It's each local board's MLS, or sometimes a conglomerate of boards will have multiple MLS together. New Mexico is going that route. Mexico has a very large MLS that covers about 50% of the state, but there's still some local boards scattered throughout that have their own. So I think that's where the issue comes in. It's sitting there saying, you can't do this because of your national MLS. Well, there isn't one. There is no national MLS. All intents and purposes, that's something that, that I see us going to someday possibly, but we don't have one, and there is not one, and there shouldn't be one. I shouldn't be able to go in there and do different searches on New Jersey and New York and Virginia. I don't have a license there. I have no business selling those homes. And it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I think the problem is lawmakers are not understanding how real estate works, and I think that's the same problem most people have in general. People don't understand. Real estate agents don't get paid till the house closes. If you wasted 4 months of their time and then went and bought a house on open house, you call them excited, like, hey, cool news, I bought a house. And you don't understand why that agent is now devastated that they lost a sale. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and misnomers in this game, and those people who don't have those understandings, lawmakers don't care enough to figure it out, and that's what's scary.
Well, and they think in bureaucrat thinking. They think like, hey, there's a disservice, there's something wrong, so we have to fix it. Sometimes the free market system does fix it, and the free market system is the way it's operating right now. Andrew may have an idea of a commission that I'm offering, but he has the full right to offer a discount. He does. But if he feels that rate should be set here, well, guess what? That's also free market. And I think this concept of that's not free market anymore, if he wants to go, listen, we know, Andrew and I have had this conversation multiple times. There is a brokerage out there that used to offer a flat $15.95 fee. They're not in business anymore, because guess what happens at a $15.95 fee? Doesn't keep you in business. So that is the direct point of competition. The Rockefeller principle is you walk in and you have so much money in your vault that you can come in and discount so low that you kill off the competition, right? That's the standard Rockefeller principle. But in your circumstance, what if I did that and I come through and try and kill everybody out? At the end of the day, I might do that same thing. That's what this particular brokerage tried to do. They tried to discount so low that they tried to take over the market, but it turned out clients still want taken care of. They still want to be taken care of in their business. So,
because at those rates, you can't offer a service effectively. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, guys, it sounds great, but someone's got to pay the utility bills. Someone's got to pay the rent. Someone's got to pay for the staff. Someone's got to pay for the computers and the coffee and all these things that come into play. And we start discounting. We've got to sell 4,000 homes a year to stay in business. Well, there's only 3,000 homes sold in the entire of El Paso. So that's going to be real difficult to do. And it's get to the point where the smaller companies are going to lose out and not going to be able to stay in business. And I don't know. It's scary. And I don't have much faith in the government to do what's best for the people. I think more often than that, they do what's best for themselves and what's going to make them look good. Just because it isn't good doesn't mean anything. Texas lawmakers spent a long time patting themselves on the back because they made a law that says any veteran's spouse can come to Texas with a real estate license and have the right to sell real estate as long as that real estate license closely matches Texas. Well, that's a beautiful law, and they can go to the VA offices and they can do all these things and say, hey, we passed this law and we're amazing. But the sad truth is 0 states match that criteria. So we've got a law in the books that says all these things can happen for veteran spouses, but it can't be followed because they don't do it. So we're going to look good, but we're not going to actually do any good. And that's the scary thing.
Yeah, and guys, not everybody has a subscription to Inman, and this is kind of where this article stemmed from. The article's name is, and I just got off the screen. So the article name is Highly Uniform Commissions Designed to Thwart Competition Study. So what happened is they came through and did a study about the relationship between the sales of homes and identifying that 21 cities, more than 80% of the buyer agent commissions rates were identical. This is stemming from the National Association of Realtors making a rule passing that MLSs would have to publicly display what a buyer agent commission is, which Andrew and I both believe that that should be public knowledge. I think Andrew's on that same page.
Absolutely.
Because listen, we both know agents that unfortunately will chase commissions, and that's not what you are supposed to do as a real estate agent. But the article goes on further to discuss the fact that after they did this, that they studied these 500 consecutive sales of single family homes, and that they believe that the commissions should fall into the range of 3 to 5% total, 3 to 4% total, right? So consumers currently pay an estimated $100 billion in commissions per year. The CFA, and I want to make sure, the Consumer Federation of America is this organization that did this study for the government. The CFA expects that with more competition, the median commission rates would go down to between 3 and 4% total. Now, here's the problem, is that they're employing these statistical points of information to define law and trying to enforce things like the Sherman Antitrust Act. It's a dangerous game, and I don't think anybody, it's kind of the same conversation that we had with clear cooperation. They're not looking at the ramifications of what that does. Now, commissions are bound to come down as technology starts to take over more of our deals. I mean, Andrew and I are not even in the business where we used to have to drive around and pick up MLS cards, but I've heard a lot about it, right? And the thing is that used to be a lot more difficult to sell a house back then than it is today. I mean, I think you would agree with me there, Andrew. Yeah.
Also, I mean, back before fax machines, and before, I mean, you had to drive over to their house and meet with them to get an initial. Now I can send you a text message and you can email it, sign on your phone, and I'll be back in a minute and a half.
And that's the thing. So technology is helping, and it is allowing us to scale, which is allowing for that company that we mentioned a moment ago in today's market may have a little better success. So yes, I do believe competition is a fair thing. I don't think that government oversight to tell us that competition has to happen is the correct way. So that's long-winded to say, guys, just be understanding that this stuff is going on. I'll post that article. It is a Inman article, so you either can sign up for a trial or you can have a subscription to it. As a trade magazine, I think it's well worth the money, and I do strongly suggest it. But at the end of the day, that's personal preference. But it's great knowledge. Great knowledge. Learning stuff all the time has a lot of benefit. So that's all I got on it.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things where, we like to make rules, and we'll figure out what the damage is later and see what we can do. And the problem is damage can be detrimental, and it can take a long time to fix. And there's no right answer here. But when you start talking out of both sides of your mouth, and one voice saying it's against the law to set rates, and the next saying, but we want to set your rates, doesn't make a lot of sense.
And that's the thing. They didn't say that. What they said is, hey, we think that they should be here, right? But in the public's eyes, they interpret it the same way Andrew just did, because that's what they hear, right? So just be cautious of this and understand what it's ending up with, and that we just need to be kind of representative of what's going to end up happening. If we're not diligent, that's it. We just have to be diligent. Andrew makes a very good analogy in this scenario, that everybody has a charity that they're in love with, okay? But the problem is when they're put in a point of authority, guess who gets that money, right? The charity of their choice. Doesn't make it a bad charity, does make it a good charity. Makes it a charity of their choice because they're in a position of power. In that position of power, we are supposed to be defined that we are supposed to take care of the greater good. But unfortunately, it has one problem with that. It's the human element. And the human element tends to be the bad side of every equation. And it doesn't necessarily have to have bad intentions to be bad, right? I think Andrew saw that firsthand in the public sector, is that I don't think anybody really ever walked up there to set a bad example or to put a bad rule in place or add a bad law. They probably had good intentions, but as Andrew mentions, good intention. What is your saying?
The path to hell is paved in good intentions.
Path to hell is paved in good intentions. So, guys, just be careful and make sure that you are understanding what's going on. That's all. I think that's what we're here for. Listen, the value add to us is that hopefully we have some realtors that know what's going on in the market and know what's going on with their commissions and know what DOJ is. And I fight Andrew tooth and nail on this, but involvement in your board. We have a wonderful new Greater El Paso Board of Realtors president. And most of the time, somebody that has run and gone through that process of becoming a president of a board usually has some really good intentions, and maybe getting yourself involved to understand this kind of stuff, because Andrew and I are both on a board. Andrew's on like 17 of them. The point is that you get more knowledge of understanding why things sometimes go the way they do, right? And it doesn't always go Andrew's way, and it certainly doesn't go on my way all the time. But you know what? At least you know why it went a different direction. So, cool.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. All right. Appreciate it, and hope you guys have a great weekend.
See you later, guys.